Legends, I hope you're all amazing. We've got the new Friedman Plex on the bench today. This is essentially a recreation of Dave Friedman's favorite 1968 Marshall Plexi with some additions on there that I think make this very, very usable. Obviously, you've only got the two inputs over here, so the amp is internally jumpered. If you just want the sound of, say, volume 1, you turn volume 2 all the way down. It does have the dual volume controls on there with a 3-way bright cap each. So you can kind of take this to some areas that an original Super Lead couldn't with those options on there, especially the bright cap options on volume 2. We'll get to that later in the video. All the way over on the other side of the amp, we've got some kind of stealth options on here where the power switch has like a high voltage and a low voltage switch on there. So basically, if you want the Variact Brown sound in there, you can use the low voltage option on there. If you want the kind of more strident, stiffer response on there, you can use the high voltage option. There is also a master volume control on here, so a post phase inverter master volume on there, and you could hear sort of in the middle of that intro blast that I gave you right there, I turned that down, and having that in the lower ranges is obviously quieter, but it gives you some really aggressive, nasty, kind of more modern or modded tones on there. Then you got your standard Plexi style stuff on here with your 3-band EQ, presence, and dual master volume controls over there. On the back, there's basically just a bunch of speaker output options. There's no effects loop on this amp. The whole ethos of this amp is basically to take a classic beloved amplifier, sprinkle it with a few new modern features on there that players want, but kind of not going too far down the modern direction on there. It's a pretty inspiring amp to play through. I took this one out of the box and I didn't adjust any of the settings. I think the bass maybe have been a bit lower than I had it at the moment on here. Plugged it in, played an A chord and got the this is really good kind of experience on there. So what I'll do now is I'll just talk you through a few features that I really like on here and how you might dial this in if you were playing through the amp, and then we'll hear it with a bunch of different guitars. You know, this isn't going to do your modern chugga thing. This probably isn't the ideal amp to take down to your silent stage, you know, Monday night blues jam or your church gig on the weekend. It is designed for, you know, the colossus of rock tone that we all know from classic Marshalls. So the bright cap switches on here. If you want the classic old school Plexi thing, according to the manual anyway, set this one in the middle. And normally when I'm dialing in a non-master volume Marshall style amp, what I will do is I'll leave volume 2 all the way off. Like I either won't jumper the amp or I'll just jumper it and ignore that on there. Then we've got the 3-way bright over here. Having it set to the right is going to be your wide open, aggressive Plexi thing. Then what I'm going to do here is crank this master volume control all the way up. So essentially it's out of the circuit. Doing it that way, you know, you've basically got a recreation of Dave's 68 Plexi, which is pretty awesome. Then I'll let you hear the high voltage switch over here. I'll just crack a couple of open chords and we'll switch over to the low voltage sound, which not only sounds slightly different, it's a bit squishier and saggier. It's just way more forgiving to play. So something like this. We heard the 3 different bright cap options on channel 1 just there. I mean, to the right, it's that classic angry thing we associate with so many guitar tones from the late 60s and early 70s on there. I'm going to do my best not to butcher too much Van Halen in this video. I'll get the Wolfgang out in a second, but basically, you know, that's your Van Halen sound if you want that old school Plexi thing. Having it off, I think is going to work quite nicely with a Strat, but I do like having it to the left on there where it's a much lower bright cap value on there. It's still adding that extra little bit of spice and bite, but nowhere near as aggressive as having it to the right on there. The interesting thing is the bright cap on the second volume over here. So I'm going to turn this one down all the way. And so, you know, this is a thing that not a lot of people love on old school Marshalls on here using channel 2, but having a bright cap option on there kind of gives you some interesting tones on there. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'll take the bass all the way down. I'll crank the middle and the treble over here. We'll set this to around noon. I'll go to one of the tapped modes on my DGT for now. Let's just hear the bridge pickup. No bright cap, then we will go to the right and to the left. point of difference with this bright cap option on volume 2 is when you're blending the channels though. So I'll go back to having channel 1 up around halfway. It's bright switch to the right position on there. I brought the bass back up and the treble and mids down just a little bit there. What I'm going to do is just blend in a little bit of volume 2 on there just to fatten up the core tone. So we'll have that big aggressive plexi style thing, and then we'll just sweeten it up. It's almost like a secondary bass control. Okay, that's a thing. We all know that's a thing. Let's start there and hear the volume 2 bright cap either to the left or the right. This is where it diverges from the thing. Like having to have that bright switch to the left on volume 2 and then blending in volume 2. That to me gets me closer to what I always expected blending the 2 volume controls on a plexi style amp would do. That's super rad over there. Kind of the last thing we haven't looked at is the master volume control over here. It's pretty interesting. Have a listen to what it does as I turn it down. You're going to hear a volume drop, obviously, but there's a really distinct point, like maybe about 2 or 3, where I think you're just going to have to hear what it does. But to me, it's like you get this chainsaw, unbridled aggression out of it. It goes from more that kind of glowing plexi style thing to more of like an early 2203 style tone on there. So what I'll do is you'll hear the volume go down, but then I'm going to adjust the volume in post so that you can hear them level match and really hear the difference in tone there. That's pretty awesome having that master volume control down there. Being able to crank up the volumes. We heard all the tone controls cranked up on there as well on the high voltage and on the low voltage mode. Stupid amounts of fun. We need to hear this with a Strat now. stumps right there. This thing sounds great. If you like classic Marshall tones, there's no denying this is a fantastic specimen. It nails basically what it's set out to do, and it gives you just a few extra little options to take that classic sound in a few different directions on there. This isn't going to be the amp for everybody. This is an amp that is made by somebody who loves the classic old Plexis for players who want a great example of that circuit without having to break the bank on buying a vintage amp and then having it serviced. And this is something that I'm going through at the moment. I recently bought a late 70s Marshall 2959 that I've sent over to Jason at Headfirst to do some mods to. You know, you can grab this one and it's got most of the popular mods already on there. There's no modern features like effects loops or channel switching, but if you just want something that gives you that old school experience of working your guitar, volume and tone controls using different guitars, and playing around with the subtleties that you can get between blending channels, playing around with the bright switches on there, it's super fun and it is super inspiring to play. Big thank you to Friedman and Boutique Amps Distribution for getting me this example to try out on the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you want to support what I do here on the channel, links to my Patreon and the music that I make with my band Ragdoll are linked in the video description. What I'm going to do now is leave this on the kind of low voltage Variact mode over there. I'm going to crank up volume 1 over here. I'm going to add a bunch of wet effects in post and just go to town on it for a little bit longer. Thanks so much for watching the video. I'll see you next time.